Okay, so here we're continuing up AUC section 315 for understanding the entity and assessing the risk of material misstatement. In the past couple of videos, we've been going through gaining an understanding of the entity's internal controls. In the last series, or the last three videos, we gave an overview of AUC section 315.13, which tells kind of an overview of what an entity's internal controls are. So now we're going to be diving a little deeper into how do we gain an understanding of their entity's internal controls that are relevant. And so this is in AUC section 315.14. And it says, when obtaining an understanding of the controls that are relevant to the audit, we should evaluate the design of those controls and determine whether they have been implemented by performing procedures in addition to inquiry of the entity's personnel. So we have two things that we have to learn about the entity's relevant controls. That is, that they how they are designed, and then also if they've been implemented. So that's two different things. So the design would be the way that they are supposed to be, or the way they're set up to operate. And then implemented would be whether or not the entity is actually performing the controls the way that they were designed. And so we got some explanatory material here, section A75 through 77, where we'll learn a little bit more about how to determine this. And this is typically, and they're making a point here about you can't just do inquiry to determine whether the controls have been implemented. You actually kind of have to walk through what we call a walkthrough with the control owners to determine whether they are actually doing those controls and understanding how they work and how they're implemented. So let's go down to the explanatory material. Okay, so now we're down to explanatory material about the nature and extent of our gaining understanding of the entity's relevant controls. So first they tell us a little bit about the difference between what the design of a control is and what implementation of the control is. As we discussed before, if the internal control is poorly designed, then there could certainly be a significant deficiency or material weakness, no matter if they've implemented the control. Certainly if they implement a control that's poorly designed, that's not really helpful in the control. So we need to understand how they're designed. And then that also flows into next how they are implemented. So if there's a really good, really well-designed control, but they haven't implemented it, then there's a risk of material misstatement there, which would cause a significant deficiency or material weakness. So next they give us some steps that we can use to gain an understanding of this design and implementation of controls. And this might include inquiring of the entity's personnel, observing the application of specific controls, it's commonly called a walkthrough, inspecting documents and reports, and tracing transactions through the information system relevant to the financial reporting. So typically what might happen in a walkthrough might be that we talk to the control owner and we have them maybe give us an example, like if that day they are processing payroll. We sit down with them and talk to them about their process for processing the payroll, and we watch them as they, for instance, maybe enter the employee's time from their timesheets and initiate all of the transactions and such. And as they're going along through that, we inspect documents and reports that they use. For instance, maybe they compare the employee's timesheets to the payroll detail report that shows the hours worked and such. And that might be a good control. So we inspect those documents as they're doing that. And we also trace the transactions through the information system that's relevant to the financial reporting. So for instance, if their payroll is processed through ADP, we might trace the number of hours that were worked from the timesheet all the way through the actual paycheck that is printed out or direct deposited to the employee's account. So in a sense, we would just follow the client's control owner through the entire process and talk to them about it, observe what they're doing, inspect documents along the way, and trace those documents through the systems. And that would really give us a good understanding of how the control is designed and also that it's implemented. And so next they reiterate the issue of understanding the design of the control and whether or not it has been implemented is not enough evidence and doesn't tell us certainly whether the control is effective or not. The only way to determine if the controls are actually effective is by testing them. And that comes about in a different section of the standards and the audit. For our purposes of understanding the entity, we only need to determine what the design of the control was and whether or not it has been implemented. If we were to rely on these controls in our substantive testing, we would actually have to test these controls. But as for now, we just have to gain an understanding of what they are.